Here's a closer look at the damage that we're going to be fixing today. Let's make a start. Things like these surf skis are actually a really good place to start if you're trying to learn how to repair surfboards. They're just a bigger, chunkier version of a surfboard, really. So we start the same way, using our old mate Stan Lee knife. We cut away any loose glass, scuff everything up with 120 sandpaper, get it all roughed up, get all the loose little sharp edges away, you know. Then we're going to make a bit of a masking tape dam here. And same with the surfboards, we're going to pour, in this case, 4 parts of part B and 4 parts of part A. Mix it all together for a couple of minutes. This is 64 kg foam, this one, which won't be structural, but it's going to give me something to sand to shape, and then I can glass over it and get a nice shape out of it. Tide was a little low today, so I'll come back tomorrow, give it a sand, and fill the rest. Chee-hoo! Not a lot is going to change today. Like I said yesterday, the tide was a little low on the pour of 64 kg foam. So we're going to sand it roughly to shape here, and we're going to fill up the rest of it, and then we can really work on our shape. We may have to do 1 or 2 more pours just to get enough foam to get the correct shape, but time will tell. For now, we'll just fill up this gap. If you're new to my videos, usually I am repairing surfboards, but when the clubs need help, I'll help them out with these surf skis. If you have questions about these 2-part expanding foam, I do have a video on my channel where I go over a lot of the FAQs about the foam, densities, all the rest, how to use it. But I do use these for fixing both EPS and poly boards as well. I'll use a slightly less dense foam, a 56 kg for surfboards, just because this 64 kg stuff is generally a bit hard for surfboards. That's it, she's all closed up. Hopefully tomorrow we can get a shape out of it with some sanding. Chee-hoo! After our second foam pour yesterday, seems like we've got enough, and I was able to shape all of it to the correct shape. So that's good, we don't have to pour any more foam. We can move on to getting a nice shape out of it, and then we've got to fill it. You can see there's some air bubbles and some gaps. And after sanding the top side of the nose, there's a significant low spot, so we're going to have to fill that and level it out as well. We're going to use a Kinetics epoxy on this board mixed with some high density West Systems 404 filler. This stuff's great. It's almost an adhesive, but it gets thick like a bog, but spreads like a cream. Definitely get yourself some of that. Although these surf skis are made of poly resin and chop strand cloth, I'm using epoxy because I'm only really doing 1 stage of these boards a day, and then I'm going back to the workshop to get on with the other jobs. So I'm happy to use epoxy on this. If I were doing it in the workshop, I'd use poly, but the epoxy is just easier to transport to and from. And that's it, she's all sealed up, ready for a sand tomorrow. Chee-hoo! So, in our previous episodes, we have cut back all the damage. We've filled the area up with a 64 kilogram foam. We've shaped it, then we've coated it with a West Systems 404 high density filler, and now we're going to sand all that filler smooth, and then we're able to put some, in this case, 6-ounce fiberglass cloth over the bottom. It's going to wrap the nose, and I'm going to put a little bit extra on the corners of the nose just because that's a high impact area. Tomorrow, once all of this has kicked off, we're going to give it a buzz back, sand it up, and then we're going to repeat this step, but the fiberglass is going to wrap from the top side to the bottom side. So by the time this job's done, we're going to have 12 ounces of fiberglass cloth over all of this, and our corners with a little bit of reinforcement. If you've been following this little series, cheer to you, and we'll see you in tomorrow's one. And if you haven't, go check out the previous ones on my channel, and make sure you hit the subscribe button. Chee-hoo! If I was smart, after yesterday's video, I would have waited 3 to 4 hours and then done this cut when the resin was still a little bit soft, not fully cured. But by then I was about 3 rums deep and I just couldn't be bothered, to be honest. So after a bit of faffing around with the Stanley knife and cutting it out, we're sanding our edges pretty aggressively, feathering them into the original surface. Flip the board over, we're going to do the same on the other side. While we're sanding the edges of the cloth aggressively, we don't want to sand the cloth that's above our damage aggressively because we'll be weakening our own repair. So we're just scuffing the cloth above the damage and sanding the edges of the cloth hard. Laying our new piece of 6-ounce from the top, folding around to the bottom side. This will be our last lamination. Spend a bit of extra time on the corners because that's where you're going to get your air bubbles, get them nice and flat. And tomorrow we'll sand it and give it a resin coat. Shot for watching, hit the subscribe button. Chee-hoo! I spent most of my 20s traveling the world, bombing hills as a competitive downhill skateboarder, and a lot of people used to ask, when you're doing like 100 k's an hour on a skateboard, how do you not get speed wobbles? And the answer I always used to say was, if you think about speed wobbles, you will get speed wobbles. Now that I fix surfboards and other surf craft and I do a lot of work with epoxy, a lot of people ask me, how do you not get fish eyes and bubbles and weird blemishes in your epoxy coats? And the answer is the same. If you think about fish eyes, you're going to get fish eyes. Unfortunately, I have to do these surf skis in my dusty shed at home. I've got no exhaust system. I don't have any vacuum for this crappy cordless Makita. I don't have any air compressor. All I've got is this dusty old towel to wipe areas clean, and that's it. But as long as I mix my epoxy at the correct ratio and don't pour it in freezing cold weather, I'm going to get a perfect result every time. And don't think about fish eyes. Chee-hoo! Generally, I'm not a big fan of working at home, but the big benefit over going to the workshop is I get to wear my slippers while I work. Not everything goes to plan on these jobs. This day in particular, I prepped this surf ski and the other four behind me for their resin coats. Got all the prepping done, all the sanding done, and then realised I didn't bring a brush home with me from the workshop. So I had to drive all the way to the workshop to get a brush, then drive all the way back home to put these resin coats on, and then drive all the way back to the workshop to do all the other jobs that are sitting in the workshop, and then all the way back home at the end of the day, obviously. So all the money I made today probably went to paying for fuel, just driving from work back home 700 bloody times. That's it, we let this cure, and then we are up to painting this weekend, hopefully. Chee-hoo! Well, hello ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a nice weekend. My weekend consisted of sanding back the resin coat we poured last week, hitting all the hard edges and the high spots with 120, then moving up to 240 to smooth it out, then 320, all on the orbital until I got to that sticker, peeling the sticker off, and then wet sanding up to 600, making sure to get rid of all these shiny spots like this. So I had to dry it off a couple of times, re-wet sand it, until it was nice and dull and there was no shine. Any shiny spots is where your paint's going to fail in the future. Once I was satisfied with the sanding, got to masking, and because yellow has such terrible coverage, I gave it a quick jet of white first before applying the yellow. Always starting with the edges first so we don't get overspray on our nice flat bit on the top here. Once I had good coverage with the yellow and you couldn't see through it anymore, a couple of coats of clear and let that dry off for a sand before we apply our black tomorrow. Chee-hoo! So in yesterday's adventures, we painted this yellow patch on the tip of the nose. So now that it's cured today, we're going to scuff it back with some 600 wet, dry it off, and then we're going to mask that yellow away, hiding it from our black paint that we're about to apply. Once we have our black paint applied, we're going to pull off the masking tape from this yellow patch and we're going to clear coat all of it together to get rid of any masking edges. As opposed to the yellow, the black has excellent coverage, so our first coat is only going to be over what we're trying to hide, and then our second coat will go further back and blend into the original black of the board. Now that that paint's laid down, we're going to peel off from this yellow area, and then, like I said, we can apply our clear coat over everything all together to try and hide those masking lines a little more, give us a little less sanding to do tomorrow once all of this is cured. That's it, she's all laid up. Tomorrow we can sand and polish. Chee-hoo! So unfortunately, when I applied my clear coat, it was pissing down with rain, and that ended up ghosting the clear coat with the humidity in the air. I spotted it happening while I was spraying, so I let the first coat of clear cure, and then I sanded it, and then I applied another coat of clear. That one ghosted as well, but because it's the top layer of clear that's ghosted, I'm able to sand it out with my 800 and polish it away. If you ever notice ghosting in your clear coat, stop immediately. Don't put another coat over the top, because then you'll never be able to sand it out of that bottom coat. That's it, you guys. Thank you so much to everyone who's watched this little short series. It's been pretty fun to make, and I think this came up pretty well. If you don't remember what it looked like before, there it is at the beginning. So a big improvement on what was a pretty munted nose on this surf ski. So all the clubby boards are now finished. I'm back in the workshop, back to a regular schedule. It's going to be nice being in the work shed again. Cheers again for watching, guys. Chee-hoo!